The classroom lights dimmed as Professor Lin activated the old recording. 60 young faces watched the screen with rapt attention, most of them born long after the events they were about to witness. This was history class in the Outer Rim, where every student learned about the day that changed everything. The image flickered to life, showing the grand chambers of the Galactic Council 2 centuries ago. 7 species sat in their elevated seats, looking down at a lone human figure in the center. Ambassador Richard Daniel stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gray suit looking plain, compared to the elaborate robes and biological displays of the aliens around him. The Talus representative spoke first, water cascading down its translucent body as it gestured. Humanity has demonstrated repeated disregard for established protocols. Your species acts without consultation, without consideration for collective decisions. Another voice joined in, this one from a towering reptilian being. 17 incidents of unauthorized military action. 23 violations of trade agreements. Your people refuse to follow the most basic rules of civilized society. Daniels remained silent, letting them speak. The charges kept coming. Humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, too individualistic. They questioned authority. They took risks. They couldn't be trusted to maintain the peace that the core worlds had enjoyed for millennia. "We have deliberated for months," the Supreme Chancellor announced, his crystalline body glowing with each word. "The verdict is unanimous. Humanity is hereby expelled from civilized space. You have 1 solar cycle to evacuate all human colonies within core territory. You will relocate to the Outer Rim territories beyond our borders." In the classroom, several students gasped even though they knew how the story ended. Professor Lin paused the recording. The Outer Rim back then was nothing like it is today. It was lawless space, full of pirates and warlords. The Council expected humans to die out there within a generation. She resumed the playback. Daniels finally spoke, his voice calm but carrying throughout the chamber. "You're making a mistake. Not because we'll seek revenge. We won't. But because you're throwing away the one species that could have saved you from yourselves. You've grown soft in your peace. You've forgotten how to survive real threats. When trouble comes, and it will, you'll wish you had kept us around." The council members laughed. One of them actually laughed at the human's words. The recording ended with Daniels walking out of the chamber, his head held high despite the exile. Professor Lin turned the lights back on. That was 200 years ago. Today, we're going to talk about what happened next. But she never got the chance to continue her lesson. An alarm blared through the school, and a voice came over the intercom. "This is not a drill. All personnel to emergency stations." The professor's communicator buzzed. She read the message, and her expression shifted from concern to something else. Disbelief, perhaps. Or maybe irony. "Class dismissed," she said quietly. "History just caught up with us." Across the Outer Rim, at Roosevelt Station, Captain Maria Santos sat in the command center of her patrol vessel. Her shift had been routine until the distress signal came through. She almost ignored it at first. Distress calls were common out here, usually from merchant ships that had wandered too close to pirate territory. But then she saw the identifier code. Her hand froze over the controls. "Captain, are you seeing this?" Her communications officer asked, his voice tight. "I'm seeing it," Maria replied. "I just don't believe it." The signal was coming from a council vessel. Not just any council ship, but a diplomatic transport bearing the official insignia of the core world's government. The same government that had exiled her ancestors. The same council that had condemned humanity to die in the wilderness of space. The message was brief and desperate. "This is Council Diplomatic Vessel Harmony requesting immediate assistance. We are under attack by raider forces. Hull integrity at 40%. Life support failing. Please respond." Maria's crew looked at her, waiting for orders. Some of them had anger in their eyes. Their grandparents had been among the exiled, forced to leave behind homes and lives because the council deemed them unworthy. Others showed curiosity. The council never came to the Outer Rim, never acknowledged human territory, never admitted they might need anything from the species they'd cast out. "Captain?" her tactical officer prompted. Maria leaned back in her chair, a dozen thoughts racing through her mind. She could ignore the call. Let the council ship limp away or fall to the raiders. No one would blame her. The council had shown humanity no mercy 2 centuries ago, but that wasn't who humans were. That wasn't who they had become out here in the Rim. She activated the response channel. Her voice was dry, almost amused. Well, look who came crawling back." There was a pause on the other end. Then a voice responded, pride barely masking desperation. "This is Ambassador Sarah of the Talos delegation. We require urgent assistance. Our jump drive is damaged, and hostile forces are pursuing." "We're aware," Maria said. She nodded to her helmsman. "Set intercept course. Full speed." As her ship surged forward, Maria allowed herself a small smile. Her great-grandmother had been on one of the exile ships forced to leave Earth's colonies in core space. The old woman had died before seeing humanity thrive, but she'd always said the same thing: they'll regret it someday. Not because we're vengeful, but because they'll need us and realize what they threw away. Today, it seemed, was that day. ETA to Council vessel. 12 minutes, her navigator reported. "Arm weapons," Maria ordered. "And open a channel to Roosevelt Station. Tell Governor Hayes we've got visitors." Very unexpected visitors. Through the view screen, she could see the distant flashes of weapons fire. The council ship was putting up a fight, but barely. Raiders swarmed around it like predators circling wounded prey. "Incoming message from the raider group," communications reported. "They're warning us to stay out of their business." Maria's smile widened. "Tell them this is our business now. Tell them they're in human space and they need to leave, now." The raiders didn't leave. They never did, not when they thought they had easy prey. But they were about to learn what every pirate in the Outer Rim had learned over 2 centuries. Humans didn't back down. Not ever, and the council was about to learn something too. The species they'd exiled hadn't just survived. They'd built something stronger than the core worlds could imagine. They'd built it from nothing, in the most dangerous corner of the galaxy. Now the council needed them. The question was whether humanity would answer that call. Ambassador Sarah had never felt so humiliated in her entire diplomatic career. Her transport limped into Roosevelt Station with scorch marks across the hull and half its systems offline. The human patrol ship had driven off the raiders with an efficiency that shocked her. 3 warning shots, 2 disabled pirate vessels, and the rest had fled into the darkness of space. The entire engagement lasted less than 4 minutes. Now, as she walked down the docking ramp with her delegation, she prepared herself for what she expected to find. Primitive conditions, military dictatorship, perhaps even hostility and revenge. The council's projections had been clear. Humanity could not possibly have built anything sustainable in the lawless Outer Rim. Those projections, Sarah realized within the first 30 seconds, were completely wrong. Roosevelt Station stretched before her like a small city suspended in space. Market stalls lined the main concourse, vendors from dozens of species selling goods she recognized and many she didn't. Overhead, transparent panels showed the stars beyond, and ships of every size and configuration came and went from the docking ports. The air smelled of cooking food, machinery, and the distinct mixture of atmospheres required by different alien biologies. "Ambassador Sarah?" A human woman approached, flanked by 2 guards who carried weapons, but didn't point them. "I'm Governor Ann Hayes. Welcome to Roosevelt Station." Sarah studied the governor. Hayes appeared to be in her 60s, with short gray hair and a face lined by experience. She wore practical clothing, not the formal robes Sarah expected from someone in power. Her handshake was firm, but not aggressive. "Thank you for the rescue," Sarah said, forcing diplomacy into her voice despite her confusion. "We are grateful. Grateful enough to explain what the Council wants after 200 years of silence." Hayes asked, her tone pleasant but her eyes sharp. "Perhaps we could discuss this somewhere more private." Hayes gestured to the bustling station around them. "This is as private as it gets in the Rim. We don't believe in closed doors here. But if you prefer, my office has fewer distractions." As they walked through the station, Sarah couldn't stop noticing details that contradicted everything she'd been told. A human doctor treated an insectoid patient with obvious expertise. Children from at least 6 different species played together in a central plaza. 2 merchants, 1 human and 1 from a species she didn't recognize, argued cheerfully over prices while sharing what appeared to be alcoholic drinks. "How many species live here?" Sarah asked despite herself. "On this station?" "About 40 at last count." "In the Outer Rim overall?" "We stopped counting at 200. Hayes guided them into a lift that rose through the station's central core. Turns out a lot of folks didn't fit into the Council's perfect vision of civilization. When you exiled us, we found all the others you'd forgotten about. The lift opened into an observation room that doubled as Hayes's office. The view was spectacular, showing the full scope of the station and the ships around it. Hayes poured water for the delegation without asking servants to do it. "Your medical facilities," one of Sarah's assistants said. "We passed them on the way here. They appeared quite advanced." "They are," Hayes confirmed. "When you're this far from civilized space, you learn to take care of your own. Our doctors train for everything because they have to handle everything." Sarah decided to be direct. "The Council predicted your extinction within 50 years. We expected to find survivors at best, not a thriving society." Hayes laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The Council made a lot of predictions. All of them were wrong because you based them on one bad assumption. You thought dumping us in hell would break us. You forgot that humans are very, very good at surviving hell." She activated a wall display showing a memorial. Thousands of names scrolled past, each one engraved with dates and brief descriptions. "These are the humans we lost in the first 50 years. Raiders, pirates, warlords, diseases, accidents, starvation. 1 in 5 of the original exiles died, making this place livable." Sarah felt something uncomfortable twist in her chest. Guilt, perhaps. "I'm sorry for your losses. Are you?" Hayes turned to face her fully. "Because the Council isn't. You sentenced us to death. You just wanted it to be slow and far enough away that you wouldn't have to watch." "I wasn't born when the exile happened," Sarah protested. "Neither was I," Hayes replied. "But I grew up hearing stories from my grandmother. She was 12 when they forced her family onto an exile ship. She watched her younger brother die in the first year out here because we didn't have enough medical supplies. The Council knew that would happen. They counted on it." The room fell silent. Sarah's delegation shifted uncomfortably. Finally, she spoke the truth she'd been sent to deliver. "The core worlds are failing," she said quietly. "Raiders attack our supply lines with impunity. Member species fight among themselves. Corruption has spread through every level of government. We can't agree on anything long enough to solve any problems. In the past year alone, 70 billion citizens have been affected by the instability." Hayes's expression didn't change. "And you want us to help fix it?" "We need your help," Sarah admitted. "The Council is prepared to offer reparations, formal apologies, reinstatement of citizenship rights. After 200 years, you think those things matter?" Hayes walked to the window, looking out at her station. "You know what the funny thing is? Half the species living here are refugees from core space. People you abandoned or drove out because they didn't fit your rules. We took them in, fed them, protected them, built something together. She pointed to a section of the station where a group worked on repairing a damaged freighter. Humans, aliens, all working side by side. See that ship? Belongs to a Vren trading family. The Vren were strip-mined out of their homeworld by a core corporation 40 years ago. The Council did nothing. We gave them sanctuary, helped them rebuild their business. Now they're one of our most successful merchant groups. Every species here has a story like that, Hayes continued. The Council threw them away, just like you threw us away. We became strong by helping each other, by actually giving a damn when someone needed it. You want us to save you? You want us to die protecting the people who exiled us? Sarah had prepared speeches for this moment. Diplomatic appeals to reason, to the greater good, to shared history. All of them sounded hollow now. Yes, she said simply. We need you to save us. Because if the core falls, billions will die. Not just council members, but innocent people who had nothing to do with the exile. Children who weren't born yet. Families just trying to live their lives. Hayes was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was softer. You're right about that part. Billions of innocent people. That's the only reason I'm not throwing you off this station right now. She turned back to the ambassador. I'll call an assembly session. Representatives from all the Rim species will vote on whether to help you. I can't promise what they'll decide. A lot of them have very good reasons to hate the Council. When will this assembly meet? Sarah asked. 3 days. Until then, you and your people are guests here. You'll have quarters, food, medical care if you need it. You're safe. Why? Sarah couldn't help asking. Why treat us well after everything the Council did? Hayes smiled, and this time it was genuine. Because that's what neighbors do. It's what humans do. We help people who need help, even when those people don't deserve it. The Council forgot that lesson a long time ago. We never did. As the delegation was led away to their quarters, Sarah looked back at the memorial wall with its thousands of names. Each one represented someone who died because of the Council's decision. Each one had been someone's child, parent, friend, and yet these humans were still willing to help. Still willing to consider saving the civilization that had condemned them to death. For the first time in her career, Sarah wondered if perhaps humanity had never been the problem. Perhaps the Council had been wrong about everything. The assembly chamber filled slowly, representatives arriving from every corner of the Outer Rim. Some came in person, others appeared as holograms transmitted across vast distances. Governor Hayes watched them gather, recognizing faces she'd worked with for decades and some she'd never met. This was democracy in its rawest form, messy and loud and real. Walter Moss arrived early, as he always did. At 93 years old, he was one of the last living humans who remembered Earth before the exile. His hands shook slightly as he took his seat, but his mind remained sharp. Hayes knew his story well. Everyone in the Rim knew it. The chamber's architecture reflected its purpose. No elevated seats, no positions of power. Everyone sat in a circle, equal in voice and vote. It had taken years to build this system, learning from the Council's mistakes. Hayes called the session to order. We're here to decide whether the Outer Rim will respond to the Council's request for aid. Everyone knows the situation. The core worlds are collapsing, and they want our help to stabilize them. A reptilian delegate named Srin spoke first. My people were vassals to the core for 3 centuries. They took our resources, our labor, and gave us nothing. When we asked for fair treatment, they declared us ungovernable and cut us off. We nearly starved. Humans found us and helped us rebuild. I vote we let the Council burn. Several delegates voiced agreement. The anger in the room was palpable, decades of resentment rising to the surface. Then Walter stood. The chamber quieted immediately. Everyone knew who he was, what he'd survived. I was 23 when they exiled us, Walter began, his voice rough but steady. I had a wife and a 2-year-old daughter. We were scientists, both of us, working on terraforming projects in core space. We weren't soldiers, weren't politicians, just people trying to make a living. He paused, collecting himself. The exile ships were overcrowded. Not enough supplies, not enough medicine. We knew it was intentional. They wanted us to die out here where they wouldn't have to see it. My daughter got sick 3 months into the journey. Simple infection would have been nothing with proper medical care. We didn't have it. I held her while she died, and my wife held me while I broke. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Even the representatives appearing by hologram seemed to lean forward. My wife killed herself a year later, Walter continued. Couldn't live with the guilt of surviving when our child didn't. So yes, I have every reason to hate the council. Every reason to want them to suffer like we suffered. He looked around the circle, meeting eyes. But here's what I learned out here in the Rim. Revenge doesn't bring anyone back. Hate doesn't build anything. The council was wrong about humans, wrong about all of us. They thought we'd become like them, cold and bureaucratic and concerned only with our own survival. We didn't, Walter said firmly. We became something better. We built a society based on helping each other, on being stronger together than apart. If we let billions die just to spite the council, we become exactly what they accused us of being. We become the monsters they feared. He sat down, exhausted by the speech. Hayes saw tears on several faces around the circle. A young pilot named Rachel stood next. She couldn't have been more than 25, born long after the exile. My grandparents were on the same ship as Walter. They told me stories about the early days, about how hard it was. But they also taught me something important. They said, humans are defined by what we do when things are hardest, not easiest. Rachel's voice grew stronger. The council is wrong. They've always been wrong about us. But that doesn't mean we're wrong about them. There are billions of people in core space who never voted for the exile, who don't even know it happened. Children, families, people just trying to live. If we let them die to punish the council, we're no better than the council that punished us. The debate raged for hours. Representatives from species the council had abandoned spoke about their pain, their losses. Others argued for compassion, for being better than their oppressors. Hayes let them talk, let them release decades of buried feelings. Finally, Risseth spoke. The insectoid delegate had been one of the first non-human species to join the Rim Confederation. Humans taught my people something we had forgotten. They taught us that strength isn't about conquering others. Strength is protecting those who cannot protect themselves, even when they don't deserve protection. Risseth's compound eyes glittered in the chamber lights. The council doesn't deserve our help. But the innocent people in core space do. That's the difference between us and them. We don't base our actions on who deserves what. We act on who needs help. Hayes felt the mood shifting. She'd been around politics long enough to sense when consensus was forming. I propose a compromise, she said. We send a scouting mission first. Small team, mixed crew. They'll assess the actual situation in core space and report back. Then we make a final decision based on facts, not assumptions. The vote was close but clear. 60% in favor of the scouting mission. Hayes felt relief and trepidation in equal measure. As the assembly dispersed, Walter approached her. You're sending the team into danger, he said quietly. I know. The council exiled us because they feared us. Some of them probably still do. Your scouts might not come back. Hayes nodded. That's why I'm asking for volunteers. No one will be ordered to go. I want to go, Walter said. You're 93 years old. And I'm one of the few people left who remembers what Earth was like before the exile. If we're going to negotiate with the council, they need to see what they did. They need to look at me and remember. His eyes were hard. Besides, I'm a qualified engineer. I can still contribute. Hayes wanted to refuse, but she saw the determination in his face. Walter needed this, needed to face the council one more time before he died. All right, she agreed. But you follow orders from whoever leads the team. No heroics. She sent out the call for volunteers. Within 6 hours, she had more applicants than positions. Humans, aliens, people from every corner of the rim wanting to help. Or maybe wanting to see the core worlds that had rejected them. Captain Lucas Davis got the command. He was 42, born in the rim, and had spent 15 years running security patrols. He'd never seen Earth, never set foot in core space. But he'd studied the history, learned from veterans like Walter. Hayes briefed him privately. This might be a trap. The council has every reason to want us dead or subjugated. Watch your back. Always do, Davis replied. But Governor, what if it's not a trap? What if they really have changed? Then we'll have to decide if we can forgive them. Hayes looked out at the stars beyond her window. That might be harder than fighting them ever was. The scouting team assembled over the next 2 days. 12 people total, representing 6 different species. Walter was the oldest. A young engineer named Sophie was the youngest at 19. They loaded their ship with supplies and sensor equipment. Ambassador Sarah watched them prepare. Will you come with us? She asked Hayes. No, my place is here, holding this together. But Davis is a good man, trust him. The ship departed on schedule, jumping toward core space. Hayes watched it disappear into faster-than-light travel, carrying with it the future of both the rim and the core. She thought about Walter's daughter, dead at 2 years old because the council valued pride over compassion. She thought about Rachel's optimism, born from never experiencing the exile's horrors. She thought about all the species who'd found refuge in the rim after the core abandoned them. Be safe, she whispered to the empty space where the ship had been, and find out if they're worth saving. Davis had seen images of core space in history files, but nothing prepared him for the reality of approaching it after living his entire life in the rim. The first thing he noticed was the silence on his ship's sensors. No chatter on communication channels, no busy traffic patterns, no signs of the vibrant civilization that supposedly existed here. The second thing he noticed was the debris. Are those ship fragments? Sophie asked from the sensor station, her voice uncertain. Davis zoomed the display. Pieces of destroyed vessels floated in orbital paths around what should have been a busy trade hub. Some wreckage looked fresh, some appeared to have been drifting for months. Yes, battle debris. A lot of it. Walter stared at the screens with an expression Davis couldn't read. The old man had been quiet during the entire journey, lost in memories of a home he'd been forced to abandon. This is wrong, Walter finally said. Even during the exile, the core maintained perfect orbital mechanics. They prided themselves on it. This is chaos. They received clearance to dock at Unity Station, the Council's primary headquarters. As their ship approached, Davis saw more evidence of decline. Whole sections of the station showed damage from weapons fire. Repair crews worked on external hull breaches, but their movements seemed slow and disorganized. The docking procedure took 3 times longer than it should have. The traffic controller sounded exhausted, juggling too many ships with inadequate systems. When they finally locked into a berth, Davis gathered his team. Remember, we're here to observe and report. Take notes, record everything your implants can capture, but don't make accusations. We need truth, not conflict. Supreme Chancellor Morrow met them personally, which surprised Davis. The crystalline being looked dimmed, its usual glow reduced to a flicker. Captain Davis, thank you for coming. We are grateful the Outer Rim is willing to consider our situation. We haven't agreed to anything yet, Davis reminded him. We're here to see what's actually happening. Morrow's pride flickered across his features but died quickly. Of course. I've arranged a complete tour. You'll have access to any facility, any records you wish to examine. The tour was devastating. Every location they visited showed the same pattern of decay. Advanced equipment sat unused because no one could agree on maintenance schedules. Security forces had impressive weapons, but terrible coordination. Supply chains had broken down because different council species kept blocking each other's trade proposals. At a military command center, Admiral Vaughn explained the security situation. Raiders hit 3 times last week. We knew they were coming, had sensor data showing their approach vectors. By the time we got approval from all 7 council species to deploy forces, the raiders had already struck and retreated. Why do you need approval from all 7 species? Rachel S.VONN looked embarrassed. Council law requires unanimous agreement for military action. It was designed to prevent aggressive wars. Now it prevents us from defending ourselves. Davis shared a look with Walter. In the Rim, response time to threats was measured in minutes, not days. Decisions were made by whoever was closest and most qualified, then reported up the chain. The Council's bureaucracy had turned their strength into fatal weakness. They visited a medical facility next. The technology was decades ahead of anything in the Rim, but half the equipment sat idle. A doctor explained that budget disputes had frozen funding for supplies. Patients lay waiting for treatment that existed, but couldn't be delivered because no one could agree on payment authorization. Sophie recorded everything with wide eyes. She'd grown up hearing stories about the Corps' perfection, its efficiency. The reality was heartbreaking. On their 3rd day, they witnessed a raid firsthand. Alarms blared across Unity Station as pirate vessels emerged from jump space near an agricultural world called Haven. Davis rushed to the observation deck with his team. Watching through telescopes as the attack unfolded, the Council had ships nearby. Powerful warships that should have easily driven off the raiders. But they didn't move. Davis listened to the command channel, hearing the desperate arguments between different species commanders about jurisdiction, about who had authority, about whose budget would cover the ammunition costs. By the time they finally agreed to respond, the raiders had destroyed 3 farming settlements and escaped. The Council fleet arrived to find burning buildings and dead civilians. Davis couldn't stay on the station. "We're going down there," he told his team. They landed their shuttle amid the ruins of a farming community. The destruction was recent, fires still burning. Survivors huddled together, many injured, all terrified. The Council response team had sent medical supplies, but no actual doctors. Another bureaucratic failure. Sophie immediately started treating wounded civilians with the field medical training all Rim citizens received. Rachel helped evacuate people from damaged buildings. Davis coordinated the effort while Walter worked on stabilizing a collapsed structure before it crushed the family trapped inside. A local woman watched them work, confusion on her face. "Who are you?" "You're not Council military." "We're from the Outer Rim," Davis said, helping her bandaged child to a safe area. "The Rim?" The woman's expression shifted. "But I thought that was just wasteland." "Dead space." "It's home," Davis replied. "And in the Rim, we help our neighbors." "Why?" "We're not your people." Davis looked at her directly. "Does that matter?" "You need help. We can provide it." "That's enough reason." More survivors approached, drawn by the efficient aid the team provided. An elderly man recognized Walter's age and appearance. "You're human. Old enough to remember Earth." "I am," Walter confirmed, his hands steady as he applied medical sealant to a deep cut on the man's arm. "My grandfather told me about the exile. He said it was wrong, that the Council made a mistake." The man's voice dropped. "He was right, wasn't he? You're here helping us while our own government debates what to do." Walter didn't answer, focusing on his work. But Davis saw the tightness around the old man's eyes, the weight of vindication that brought no joy. thought they worked for 16 hours straight. By the time Council medical teams finally arrived, the immediate crisis was handled. Every critical patient was stable. The survivors had food, shelter, and basic security. As they prepared to leave, the woman Davis had first spoken to stopped him. "Thank you. I don't understand why exiles would help us, but thank you." "Teach your children," Davis said simply. "Teach them that the exile was wrong. That humans didn't deserve it. Maybe the next generation will be smarter than their ancestors." Back on their ship, Davis compiled the data. The evidence was overwhelming. The core was failing not from external threats, but from internal paralysis. The Council's system of checks and balances had become a noose around their own neck, but there was something else bothering him. Sophie noticed his expression. "What's wrong, Captain?" "The raiders knew exactly where to hit and when," Davis said slowly. "They had perfect intelligence about Council response times and defensive weaknesses. That's not luck." Walter understood immediately. "Someone's feeding them information." Davis nodded. "Someone in the core is helping the raiders, profiting from the chaos." He began tracing the patterns, looking at raid timing and equipment. The raiders used Council weapons, moved through Council space with impossible confidence. Within 2 days of analysis, Davis had his proof. 3 Council members were directly involved in supplying and directing the raiders. They'd set up shell companies, used their positions to block effective responses, and personally profited from every attack. "We need to tell someone," Rachel urged. "Who?" Davis countered. "If we tell the wrong person, we'll be killed before we can report back to the Rim. These people have power and resources. They're not going to let us expose them easily." That night, their ship detected movement outside. Unmarked vessels approaching from multiple vectors, weapons hot. Davis recognized a kill formation when he saw one. "Everyone to stations. We're leaving, now. They'll follow us," Sophie warned. "Let them try." Davis had spent 15 years patrolling the Rim's most dangerous sectors. He knew tricks the core had forgotten centuries ago. They jumped away just as the first missiles launched, leaving false sensor echoes that would take the attackers hours to sort through. Davis laid in a random jump pattern, making pursuit nearly impossible. As they fled toward Rim space, Davis composed his report to Governor Hayes. The message was simple but damning. The core needed help desperately, but someone in power wanted to ensure they never got it. The emergency assembly session convened within hours of Davis's report reaching Roosevelt Station. Hayes displayed the evidence on screens around the chamber, letting every representative see the corruption, the suffering, and the deliberate sabotage happening in core space. "They're worse off than we thought," Hayes concluded. "But the threat isn't just external raiders. It's internal rot. 3 Council members are actively working against their own people for profit." Risseth's antennae twitched with agitation. "If we intervene, we become targets for these corrupt officials. They already tried to kill Davis's team." "If we don't intervene, billions die," Walter countered. He'd returned from core space looking 10 years older, but more determined than ever. "I saw children in those farming settlements, families. They're not responsible for what the Council did to us. And they're suffering because their government has failed them." The debate was shorter this time. The evidence was clear, the need was obvious. The vote passed with 75% approval. The Outer Rim would intervene in core space, but Hayes added a critical condition. "We don't go as subordinates. We go as equals. The Council accepts our terms, our methods, and our authority to act, or we leave them to their fate." Ambassador Sarah, who'd remained in the Rim during the scouting mission, looked relieved and worried simultaneously. "The Council will resist giving up control. Then they'll fall," Hayes said flatly. "We're not interested in saving their pride. We're interested in saving lives." The message went to Supreme Chancellor Morrow with a simple deadline: 24 hours to accept the terms, or the offer was withdrawn. Hayes knew it was harsh, but the Rim couldn't afford to get tangled in council bureaucracy while people died. Morrow's response came in 18 hours. The council agreed to every condition. They were that desperate. Commander Patricia Torres assembled the Rim fleet. It wasn't impressive by Corps standards, just 37 ships of various sizes and origins. But every crew was experienced. Every captain knew how to handle themselves in real combat. These weren't parade forces. These were survivors who'd been fighting pirates and warlords for generations. Patricia herself was 52, a third-generation Rim native who'd never seen Earth except in pictures. She'd cut her teeth on border patrol, worked her way up through merit, and earned respect from every species she'd served alongside. Hayes couldn't have picked a better commander. The fleet arrived in core space without ceremony. Patricia broadcast on all channels. "This is Commander Torres of the Outer Rim Defense Force. We're here to restore security and order. All Raider forces are hereby notified that attacks on civilian targets will be met with immediate and decisive response." The first test came within 6 hours. Raiders hit a mining colony, expecting the usual delayed council response. Instead, Patricia's ships dropped out of jump space before the pirates could even load. Their stolen cargo. The engagement was brutal and brief. Patricia gave one warning to surrender. When the Raiders opened fire instead, her fleet responded with precision the Corps hadn't seen in decades. 3 pirate ships were disabled, 2 destroyed. The rest fled into jump space with Rim vessels in pursuit. News of the engagement spread instantly. For the first time in years, Raiders had faced consequences faster than they could escape them. The psychological impact was immediate, but Patricia wasn't satisfied with just military victories. She knew the real problem ran deeper. "Get me everything you can on weapons trafficking," she ordered her intelligence officer, a quiet human named Ben, who'd worked security analysis for 15 years. Ben was thorough. Within a week, he'd traced shipments, followed money transfers, and built a network map of corruption that reached into the highest levels of council government. 3 council members were the key figures, but they had dozens of accomplices. Patricia faced a decision that would define the intervention. She could share the evidence with Morrow and let the council handle their own corruption, maintaining diplomatic protocol. Or she could act directly and risk alienating the very government she was trying to help. She thought about the burned, farming settlements Davis had described. The children who died while council officials debated jurisdictions. The people suffering while corrupt leaders profited. Patricia made her choice. She personally led the team that arrested Council Member Thren, an influential politician from one of the founding core species. They took him into custody during a council session. In front of every delegate and broadcast across core space. The charges were specific: conspiracy to commit murder, arms trafficking, treason against the council, and crimes against sentient beings. The evidence was overwhelming. Ben had documented everything. The political explosion was immediate. Half the council praised the action. The other half called it an outrage, a violation of sovereignty, proof that humans couldn't be trusted with authority. Morrow faced the chaos with surprising strength. "The evidence is public. Everyone can see it. If we don't hold our own leaders accountable, we have no right to govern anyone." He backed Patricia fully, using the scandal to push through reforms that had been blocked for years. Transparency requirements, independent oversight, elimination of the unanimous vote requirement for defensive actions. 2. Other corrupt council members were arrested within days. Their networks collapsed as accomplices scrambled to cut deals. The Raider supply lines dried up almost overnight, but military success was only part of the solution. Walter led infrastructure teams across core space, rebuilding what years of neglect had destroyed. He brought Rim methods, community cooperation, Practical solutions over perfect protocols. And the revolutionary idea that sometimes good enough right now was better than perfect eventually. A young core engineer named Thales worked alongside Walter on a water treatment facility that had been non-functional for 3 years. Why didn't anyone fix this before? She asked in frustration. Because 7 different departments had to approve the repair plan, Walter explained, and they could never agree on specifications. In the Rim, we'd have had this running in a week. That's not how we do things here. I know. That's why your people are dying of preventable diseases while perfect plans sit in committee. Walter's tone was gentle but firm. You want to help them, or you want to follow protocol? Thales made her choice. She started approving repairs without waiting for full consensus. Other young core citizens watched and followed her example. A grassroots movement began, people choosing effectiveness over bureaucratic correctness. Patricia saw it happening across every world they helped. The younger generation of core citizens was learning from the Rim, adapting human methods to their own cultures. They were building something new from the ruins of the old system. 6 months into the intervention, the change was visible everywhere. Raider attacks had dropped by 80%. Supply lines functioned reliably. Medical facilities had supplies and staff. The corruption trials continued, revealing how deep the rot had spread, but also purging it systematically. Ambassador Sarah found Patricia working late in a temporary command center. You've done what we couldn't do for ourselves, Sarah admitted. You've saved us. We've bought you time, Patricia corrected. But if you don't change fundamentally, you'll end up right back here. The council system is broken, Sarah. You need to rebuild it from the ground up. Will you help us do that? Patricia considered the question carefully. The Rim will stay as long as we're needed. But this can't be permanent. You need to learn to save yourselves. The way you learned when we exiled you? Yes, though hopefully without the millions of deaths it cost us to figure it out. Sarah was quiet for a moment. I read Walter's testimony to the assembly. About his daughter. I can't imagine that pain. No one should have to, Patricia agreed. That's why we're here. Not for revenge, not for power. Because no child should die from bureaucratic paralysis or adult pride. Not ours, not yours. She pulled up a status display showing the core worlds. Security incidents were down across the board. Trade was recovering. People were rebuilding. We didn't return because we forgave the exile, Patricia said quietly. We returned because letting you fall would have made us the monsters you accused us of being. We're better than that. We've always been better than that. 1 year after the intervention began, the council convened a historic session. For the first time in 2 centuries, human representatives sat among the member species, not as petitioners or prisoners, but as equals. Governor Hayes attended personally, leaving Roosevelt Station in capable hands. She sat in the circular chamber, deliberately choosing a seat at the same level as everyone else. Some council traditions were worth keeping, others needed to die. Supreme Chancellor Morrow opened the proceedings. 200 years ago, this council made a decision based on fear. We exiled humanity, condemning them to what we believed would be extinction. Today, we formally acknowledge that decision was wrong, unjust, and ultimately harmful to every species in this chamber. He gestured to a display showing casualty figures, economic data, and social metrics. In the years since the Outer Rim intervention, we have achieved more stability and progress than the previous 50 years combined. Not because humans are superior, but because they remembered what we forgot. Cooperation works better than bureaucracy. The formal apology followed, read by representatives of all 7 founding core species. Hayes listened without expression. Words were cheap. She wanted to see actions. The actions came next. Full citizenship rights restored to all humans, in core and rim space alike. Reparations established. though Hayes had argued against them. Financial compensation couldn't bring back the dead. Economic partnership agreements were signed instead, opening trade between Core and RIM on equal terms. But the biggest change was structural. The council vote requirement was eliminated for defensive operations. Independent oversight councils were established for each major government function. Term limits were implemented. Transparency became mandatory, not optional. These reforms will fundamentally change how the council operates, Morrow acknowledged. Many species opposed them. But the alternative was extinction, and we all knew it. Commander Patricia was offered a permanent position as Joint Defense Coordinator, reporting to no one species but to the Council as a whole. She accepted on the condition that she could return to the Rim whenever needed. "I'm not abandoning my home to save yours," she said bluntly. Ben's intelligence network was integrated into Council security, his methods teaching a new generation of analysts. The corruption trials concluded with 17 high-ranking officials convicted and stripped of power. More importantly, the systems that enabled their corruption were dismantled. Walter stood before the council during the personal testimony session. At 94, he moved slowly but spoke with perfect clarity. "My daughter's name was Amy. She was 2 years old when she died because your exile didn't include adequate medical supplies. You killed her as surely as if you'd done it with your own hands." The chamber was absolutely silent. "I came back here not for justice, because nothing can give me justice. I came back because other people's children were dying, and I could help stop it. That's what humans do. We help even when it hurts, even when the people we're helping don't deserve it." Walter looked around the circle. "You didn't deserve our help. But those children in the farming settlements did. Those families struggling to survive did. We came for them, not for you." He sat down to overwhelming silence. Several council members openly wept. Sarah, who'd been promoted to council leadership, approached Walter afterward. "I wish I could give you back what you lost," she said softly. "You can't. But you can make sure it never happens again. That's the only reparation that matters." The integration continued over the following months. Young Core citizens volunteered to work in the Rim, learning the methods that had transformed exiles into protectors. Rim species established presences in Core space, bringing their diverse perspectives to a civilization that had grown stagnant in its homogeneity. Not everyone was happy with the changes. A conservative faction within several Core species argued that humans now had too much influence, that the reforms went too far. Hayes watched these developments carefully from Roosevelt Station. "They're not wrong to be concerned," she told Patricia during a secure call. "We need to be careful not to become what the council was, imposing our will on others." "The difference is we're willing to leave," Patricia replied. "If they want us gone, we'll go. That's not how empires work." Rachel, now a lieutenant commanding her own patrol ship, interrupted their conversation with an urgent message. "Governor, we're receiving a distress call from beyond charted space. Unknown species, their message is broken, but they're clearly in trouble." Hayes felt a familiar sensation. History repeating, but differently this time. "Can you reach them?" "Yes, but it's outside both Rim and Core territory. Technically not our jurisdiction." Hayes smiled. "Since when do we care about jurisdiction when people need help?" "Respond to the call, Lieutenant. That's what we do." The closing months of the integration period saw remarkable progress. Trade between Rim and Core increased 15-fold. Cultural exchanges brought new ideas and perspectives to both regions. Medical advances from Core technology combined with Rim. Practical experience created breakthroughs that helped everyone, but the Outer Rim remained independent. Many humans chose to stay in the territory they'd built from nothing, preferring the freedom and diversity of Rim culture to Core stability. Hayes understood. The Rim was home now, forged in hardship, but sustained by choice. Sophie, the young engineer who'd been on Davis's scouting mission, worked on a joint infrastructure project linking RIM and core communication networks. She partnered with Tulises, the core engineer who'd learned to value effectiveness over protocol. Together, they represented the future both regions were building. My grandmother was exiled, Sophie mentioned during a break. Mine voted for the exile, Tulises admitted. She thought humans were dangerous. Before she died, she told me she'd been wrong about everything. They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Tulises asked, "Do you think we can really move past it? The exile, all that history?" Sophie considered the question. "I don't think we should move past it. We should remember it. Remember what fear and pride cost both our peoples. But we don't have to let it define us forever." Governor Hayes made one final trip to Earth, seeing the homeworld for the first time in her life. It was beautiful and strange, familiar from pictures but alien in reality. She stood at the memorial they'd built to honor the exiled, reading names carved in stone. Walter had died 3 months earlier, finally at peace. His name was already on the memorial, alongside thousands of others who'd survived the exile, only to die building something better. "We did it," Hayes whispered to the dead. "We survived. We thrived. We came back not for revenge, but to help. You'd be proud." A young human child approached, maybe 5 years old, holding her parents' hand. "What is this place?" she asked. "It's a reminder," Hayes told her. "A reminder that being cast out doesn't mean being defeated. That exile can forge strength. That humans help others, even when those others hurt us first. Why would we help people who hurt us?" Hayes smiled. "Because that's what makes us human. We're strongest when we're helping others, even our enemies. Especially our enemies." The child thought about this, then nodded seriously. "That makes sense." 2 years after the intervention began, both RIM and core were stable and growing. The changes were permanent, the lessons learned carved as deeply as names on memorial stones. Humanity had proven what they'd always known, that they belonged in the stars, that they could survive anything, that they were defined not by how others treated them, but by how they treated others. Rachel's ship, now with a mixed crew of humans and multiple alien species, responded to that distress call from beyond charted space. They found a species fleeing persecution, refugees looking for safety they couldn't find in their own territory. "We know a place," Rachel told them, her crew working efficiently to provide aid. "It's called the Outer Rim. It's where people go when everyone else gives up on them. It's where you learn that being cast out is just the beginning of something better." As her ship guided the refugees toward rim space, Rachel thought about her grandparents' stories, about Walter's sacrifice, about all the humans and aliens who'd built something beautiful from exile and pain. The Council had meant to end humanity. Instead, they'd created something the galaxy desperately needed, a people who knew what it meant to be abandoned, who understood the value of compassion, who proved that strength wasn't about dominating others, but protecting them. The human story, Rachel realized, wasn't about the exile. It was about everything they'd built afterward. It was about returning not as conquerors, but as helpers. It was about being strong enough to forgive and wise enough to remember. It was about being the species the galaxy needed. Even when the galaxy didn't know it yet, the stars ahead were full of possibilities, and humanity was ready for all of them.